Juju McDowell without being Juju McDowell. He's a sophomore instead of a senior. His height and weight are different. I mean, I guess the Mick in the last name is the closest thing to a comparison there, but like they made sure that there was not going to be any kind of controversy in mixing these two guys up, which I don't know if this means McDowell opted out of the game. Everybody that we talked to have said, as far as they knew, everybody was opting in, but maybe McDowell had reasons for not wanting to be a part of it or whatever, but he's definitely not in the game.
There's some isn't there still potential to have late ads? Like, will they update the rosters and you can kind of
will. I believe so. Now, I know with guys that got on campus in the summer, they wouldn't have been in that initial wave. I don't know for sure. And Sam and I were talking about this. EA's getting set to put out its first patch of the game to kind of fix some of the glitches. I don't know if that will also include new players that are just now getting to campus or not. I know, our guy Hunter Rogers was not initially in the game, and they corrected that before it released. So I don't know what the situation for putting guys in after the fact will be necessarily.
Give me the so you sent me a screenshot of this earlier, but you have our guy Oscar Attaway highlighted. What is Simon McAllister / potential Juju McDowell? Give me the size.
We'll see. I can't look at that as of right now because this is a screen grab of a YouTube video I had of somebody. Because again, I looked at it the other day and I didn't think anything out of the ordinary until Bill and Preston were talking about it. And I was like, oh yeah, I did notice that, and I didn't even think about the fact that Juju was not included on the list. But I mean, they're shorter stature, shorter weight as well. But it's not the exact same thing, so there's not confusion. Now, the thing that Bill noticed that really kind of tipped him off was that he was returning kicks, which again is something that Juju McDowell, when healthy, obviously does. So you can see why he's that placeholder. But again, I guess that means McDowell opted out, not to our knowledge at least, but that's certainly plausible. But it's kind of funny. Like, this is the first instance I'm aware of, and there were a handful of guys that opted out of the game that we don't necessarily know about on a first-name basis, but seeing it relate to South Carolina is kind of interesting.
It's weird that they have, like, in this day and age, why have a fake player on the roster? You know, could you just have, there's no other true sophomores. You know, there's a couple true sophomores on the roster in DJ Braswell and Jawarn Howell, and the mythical Simon McAllister is the other one. So, yeah, that's kind of strange. Hey, too bad Larry Scott isn't in the game. Shout out to Larry Scott, number 39, from South Effingham in Port Wentworth, Georgia. You know, that was another surprise because we're sitting there watching the spring game.
Yep.
And number 39's taking handoffs. You're going, did somebody change numbers? And that's Larry Scott. And he joined the team in February.
Right.
And he's out there getting carries early. And apparently the staff thinks he might be able to help on special teams. So he should have been able to grab a spot.
Now,
maybe it's a stand-in for Larry Scott. Never know.
I think, don't you have to be a scholarship guy to be in the game?
Oh, I don't know. There no walk-ons?
I don't know if they included walk-ons or not. Because, I mean, if I'm a walk-on, then heck yeah, but they do have, like, a roster limit of how many guys that they can include. But I don't know. I just thought that was kind of an interesting quirk of, like, I guess Juju McDowell's not in the game.
There's a war against walk-ons right now. Yeah, the game wants to get rid of them. They want to maybe get rid of them in real life. I don't like this.
They don't want them to. They don't want them to exist at all. But yes, if you wanted to play college football 25 with Juju McDowell, I unfortunately have bad news that you'll not be able to do that. You will get, though, Rocket Sanders, Oscar Attaway, DJ Braswell, like you said, and Jawarn Howell. So you still have a pretty full running back room of 4 guys.
No Matt Fuller as a freshman.
No Matt Fuller. Now, again, that's something because he was not on campus in the spring.
That's right. Yeah, he was
came in late. So I don't know if he has the option or not. I'd have to double check on what EA's policy with that is. Because again, I don't know how many guys, not that they're not hurting for money, because I mentioned this earlier, 2.2 million people paid to play the game early last week.
Ooh.
That equates to about a little more than $60 million in just early access fees alone. So EA's got plenty of money if they do want to add some guys at the game. I just don't know if they will or not.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's a good box office opening for the game.
1,000%. Now, it'll be interesting to see in later editions of the game, like 26 and 27, how many people want to jump on it as much because, again, we had an 11-year layoff and we were all dying to finally get our hands on it. But should be a good selling game for years to come, I would think.
Yeah, it's like the band that doesn't release an album for 10 years and super anticipated, or part 2 of a movie that comes out, you love part 1. Yeah, some people will be like, hey, I got 25, I'm good. I'm in year 4 of my dynasty by now. I want to keep it going.
Well, that's
get the new game.
That's my thing, is like the amount of time that I hope I can put into it. I don't want to like have that all go away a year from now. Like I like to kind of be maybe like an every other year type of person. Like, all right, I'll buy like 27, 29. Like, allow myself some time to, because especially in dynasty mode, as you get deeper into it, you're recruiting fictional players at that point anyway. So, all those players that you have in the game eventually filter out. So, because you're kind of creating your own thing at that point in time. So, I don't know if I'm going to jump on 26, but join 25 so far.
Yeah, we need and we need college basketball back. We need a college baseball game. College basketball used to have, I think it was like maybe a 2005 game. It had Josh Childress from Stanford on the front. I remember it was an ESPN game. They actually did an awesome job with their games. They had an NFL game that was been rated as like the.
Oh yeah,
some people say the best.
2K5
had Terrell Owens on the cover. Yeah, that's been and it was probably the best like sports game I've ever played. It was phenomenal, and they had a great basketball game too. So we need those games back, and there might be a push for those. Not as big as college football, of course. But I think we could see some lower payouts to athletes, and let's get a college basketball and baseball game going.
The concern is the revenue you would get from that, because you obviously, especially if you're going to include real players now, you have to justify the means of paying those guys. And from what I understood, the EA college basketball games, because they ended before the lawsuits and stuff took place that, ended the college football game. And I don't think those games were as well selling towards the end of their run. And, they did the college baseball game 2 years, 06 and 07. I had the 07 one. It was a very fun game, but I don't know if, because again, outside of our little pocket here in the Southeast, I don't know how sought after a college baseball game would be. My hope with that is like an add-on to like MLB The Show with like a college, I don't know, showcase edition or something like that, where you can play, with a handful of maybe Power 5 college teams or something like that, that you could have your own road to Omaha within the MLB The Show game universe or something like that. That's my hope, at least.
Well, here's my question. I sense that there are going to be some more women's sports games.
Yeah.
When do we get that?
Ooh, be a good question. Now, that is an interesting way to look at it, that if you combined men's and women's college basketball into just one, because like March Madness, the original NCAA games were just men's, but if you could offer both sides of the coin there, that, I don't know, might be a little bit more attractive of a sell. So
I need to investigate this, but there is, the new 2K game.
Yes.
Asia Wilson is on the cover.
Yes.
With Jason Tatum, and there's a WNBA edition of that. What does that mean specifically?
The past couple of years, and I haven't bought any of the 2K games, but the past couple of years, they have included the WNBA in the NBA 2K series. So you can play in WNBA mode, teams, whatever it may be.
Do they have all the teams, all the players?
As far as I know, and again, it's not a full complement of 30 teams like the NBA is, but small. A handful of teams. So that's a little bit more of an easier add-on. But I think it'd probably be pretty fun to be able to play with Dawn Staley's crew and dominate the college basketball landscape on the sticks as well.
Well, but if you get 2K and you get the WNBA edition, then
you can dominate with plenty of her former players.
Get Asia Wilson, shoot some half-court threes, logo threes with Caitlin Clark.
Yep.
I assume she would be in that game. But the reason the money is not, the money is growing in that sport so much. You look at what players are getting paid, the rights, and this is something that Chris Wellbaum wrote about. Actually, he published a piece this morning on Gamecock Central, kind of a traveling with the Gamecock, like what are Gamecock women's basketball players up to. But there's a new rights deal for the WNBA, 11 years, $2.2 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And the annual payout, of course, if you do the math, it's $200 million. That's 6 times the current payout. And then, he kind of contrasts that with the fact the NCAA sold the women's college basketball rights for just $65 million, and the NCAA tournament ratings are way higher than the WNBA, at least historically. You know, there may be a little bit of a change in that. So it will be fascinating. Do we see a little bit more of a push for, you know, obviously the WNBA has crept into the 2K5, you know, video game. Do we see some type of college basketball women's edition?
I'd be all for it.
Do they put that? Do they have a college? Maybe they have a. Maybe that's the solution.
Sure.
There's a college basketball game, and there's, you know, it's kind of a 2-in-1, just like they've done with 2K.
Gotcha. I'd certainly love to see that, and we'll see if that's possible in the near future with the evolution of this return to college sports gaming. We'll talk to our guy Pete Nakos up next of On 3. Lots been going on as ACC Media Days gets rolling just up the street in Charlotte. And yesterday, bit of a war of words between the conference commissioner and the schools that are currently fighting with the ACC. We'll dive into that coming up. It is the Garnet Trust Hour, brought to you by our friends over at Krantz Heating and Cooling on your Tuesday on the Game.
Our friends over at Integrated Media can help take your home to the next level. Any type of audio-visual service that you may need, it's your go-to. It's my go-to. It's Wes's go-to. They've been out to our homes. They can come out to yours, too, whether you need something as simple as mounting a TV. If you got a bunch of wires hanging everywhere that makes it confusing, makes it look ugly, frankly, in your home, they can help you with that. But they can also outfit you with a complete smart home system where you can control all your lights, devices, your thermostat, everything from the touch of a button on your smartphone. They also do security and cameras. They can check out your internet signal. If you got dead spots, if you're getting the dreaded buffering when you're streaming on multiple devices, they can help you with that. And they can do sound systems, too. They do an awesome job with all that stuff. Integrated Media Columbia on Facebook or Instagram for examples of their past work, or if you're looking for some inspiration. And you can go to their website, integratedmediainc.com, or 803-948-8327, Integrated Media.
Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you on your Tuesday. Here on the game, head out to the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Welcome back in a regular guest here on the Garnet Trust Hour, guy Pete Nakos from On3. Pete, first of all, appreciate your time this morning. Headline of the week in college football is what's going on just up the road from us in Charlotte at ACC Media Days. What do you make of the, words that Jim Phillips had for schools like Florida State and Clemson that have been fighting with the ACC in his opening remarks yesterday?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back on, guys. I think my biggest takeaway is Jim Phillips didn't really want to mess around. It was probably the most emotional and the most aggressive we've ever heard him. He's been pretty passionate, and it really came through yesterday that Florida State and Clemson are still a part of the ACC, and that's how the ACC is going to treat it. But at the same time, obviously, these lawsuits are playing out in courtrooms in North Carolina, South Carolina, and now Florida. So really fascinating. I don't think we're really like a true end in sight or anything like that. But it was interesting to hear him talk yesterday about how he's trying to, still govern, but at the same time, there's these looming court cases.
Pete, Chris Clark here. Thanks again for taking time to join us today. You're out at Big Ten Media Days today, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good deal. All right, well, appreciate you doing that in the midst of that as well. Let's back up just a little bit. Give us kind of a broad picture overview, maybe for those who aren't as familiar. I think most people know, hey, Clemson and FSU are looking at exiting the ACC. They know that there's lawsuits and all that stuff, but what's kind of the options here, right? Like, where are things at? What can Clemson and FSU realistically do? What would it mean if they could exit? What would it mean if maybe they cannot exit the ACC? What's the timeline? What does everything mean?
Yeah, you know what? I don't really know if there's truly a path for Florida State and Clemson to land in a separate conference right now. I mean, sure, you have the SEC and Big Ten, but I'm not really sure those two are advantageous to add more. And then beyond that, there's the Big 12, but they'd have to really dip into private equity for it to make much financial sense for Florida State and Clemson to leave, because right now those TV revenue payouts are really similar.
So we know the approaching date of August the 15th is when those schools, if they were going to leave the ACC within the next year, would have to notify the conference, and it doesn't look like that's going to be happening. Assuming that we get past that date, does that mean we're having to wait until August of next year to see if anything, or see what the next potential chapter of this saga is going to be?
Yeah, I would say so. And beyond that, I mean, I've had some people indicate to me it sounds like 2027 makes a lot more sense than 2024, 2025. I mean, this is a long road. There needs to be some certainty for these schools about where they're going to land. And, even more than that, too, they need to make sure it makes financial sense. And clearly right now, there's nowhere to go that would make that really work for them.
Pete, I know that when all this started circulating, what was that? Last year, several months ago at least.
Right.
There was a notion, a thought, an idea in the public sphere that, the SEC will go after Florida State and Clemson because they're strong programs in many sports, their brands, et cetera, et cetera. From what I have been told, that was never really an option. I think Greg Sankey doubled down on that at SEC Media Days, not specifically. He maybe threw a shot or two at Florida State. But just to make sure you're hearing the same, the SEC is not an option for those two schools. And then if they were to exit at some point, 2027, whenever, like what are some potential landing spots for those two?
Yeah, I think the Big 12 was probably the leading candidate right now. The SEC and Greg Sankey have made it really clear they don't have an appetite for expansion. And then, I'm here at the Big 10 right now, and I'm staring at Oregon and USC and UCLA logos, and I'm just not very confident that the Big Ten needs to add more at the moment.
So this is kind of giving me Pac-12 vibes from a year ago, and they're not at the point of collapse just yet, but if things do end up playing out in the favor of Florida State and Clemson, and again, it's going to end up being a very long legal fight, for the next couple of years, it seems like, what is the future of the Atlantic Coast Conference if those two teams can successfully exit?
Jim Phillips made some interesting comments yesterday that if I was in his position, I'm not sure if I'd exactly say where he said, hey, we're the ACC, we'll always be the ACC, and we'll survive even if a member leaves. And From where I sit, I think the loss of Florida State and Clemson would be crippling because then soon after you probably have the North Carolina and Virginia probably evaluating their options. And, there's no secret here. A lot of the value in the ACC right now is in a Florida State, a Clemson, a Miami, a North Carolina, a Duke for basketball, and they were good in football last year too. Schools like that. It's not in Boston College and Syracuse, guys. So while they might be putting up a really strong front right now, they need those schools to stay in the conference for it to really make much sense.
Yeah, North Carolina and Virginia, by the way, a couple, schools that have actually been, to the surprise of maybe people in the public, those are two schools that the SEC and the Big Ten, from what I've heard, would be interested in at some point, certainly more than some other schools, even FSU and Clemson. Pete,
right.
Tyler may have another question on the ACC front, but I while we have you, Portal Pete, I wanted to ask you some NIL questions as well. So there's been some reporting lately on the big House versus NCAA settlement, and that, of course, is the lawsuit that would heavily impact the future model of college sports revenue sharing. Break down where that is for us and what that means.
Yeah, so talked to one of the co-counsels for the plaintiff side of the House versus NCAA settlement last week, and they said that they're anticipating that it will be submitted this week. There's been some reporting out there it could come as late as like Friday. Hearing that roster limits are going to stick around that 105 number for football, and then in the 30s for baseball. So definitely interesting, and when they do submit this, I understand it's like a pretty good-sized moment in like college sports history, but there's a long process ahead. The judge has to ratify it. People who have issues with it can come forward, and it's going to be another 6 months until that's really finalized.
And again, talking to Pete Nakos from On3, so with that, and again, you said roughly about 6 months, are we still maybe on track for seeing the 2025-2026 calendar sports year, seeing this kind of put into place?
Yeah, I'd say we're still on track for that, but it's definitely going to be very fascinating next 6 to 10 months, just seeing how it really comes together.
I want to slide one more question in here for you. You wrote about this on On3 as well, and Rich Clark was at SEC Media Days last week talking about, after this first year of the 12-team college football playoff, they're going to reconvene and kind of assess the format going forward, and we know there's heavy rumors on expanding to maybe 14 or 16 in the near future. From your knowledge, what kind of factors are they going to be looking at in whether to keep a 12-team format or expand past that in the near future?
So I talked to Rich Clark last week too, and I think they just need to make sure it goes really well. I think that's the big thing this year, and then they're going to sit down and try to figure it all out. And, if the SEC and Big Ten go in there and say, hey, we really want 16, then they might get 16. It's really going to be interesting, and I'll tell you one thing too, though. If it is a 12-team playoff and like the Big Ten has 5 and the SEC has 5 and the Big Ten has 4 or something like that, then I'm sure those two conferences will be happy. We'll have to really see how this season plays out, though.
We'll certainly keep an eye on it. We appreciate your hard work on On3, staying on top of all the legal matters seemingly going on in the world of college sports, and we'll check in with you again down the line. Appreciate it, Pete.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Again, Pete Nakos of On3 up there at Big Ten Media Days in Indianapolis. SEC Media Days going on just up the road from us in Charlotte. Remind you, as always, you can download the 107.5 The Game app. Keep us locked in wherever you go, around the state, around the country, around the world. Just go to your app store, download the 107.5 The Game app, and listen to us wherever you go. We'll come back, continue on with today's edition of the Garnet Trust Hour. He's Chris Clark. I'm Tyler Head on your Tuesday on The Game.
If you're looking for a reliable and experienced local roofing service to handle any of your residential or commercial roofing needs, They recommend our guys over at Classic Roofing, classicroofingsc.com or 803-590-7870. They're a reliable GAF certified roofer near you. What does that mean? Well, only about 7% of roofers nationally are GAF certified, so that lets you know they're reliable, they're very experienced, they know what they're doing. Roof inspections, roof installations, roof replacements, roof repairs. They can handle it all for you. Again, that's classicroofingsc.com. Go there, a lot more info. You can even see one of their cool drone videos that they like to utilize when they're checking out your roof. Joe Reeder and Max Sawyer, both longtime residents of the Palmetto State with families who live right here. 803-590-7870 or classicroofingsc.com.
We'll get back in. Garnet Trust Tower, Head Chris Clark along with you on this Tuesday. Again, thanks to our guy, Pete Nako, Savon 3 for joining us for a couple minutes there. We'll talk a little bit of Missouri with Gabe Dearmond from Power Mizzou coming up in the next hour as well, as that's going to be a vitally important game on South Carolina's schedule, and one that, you know, we hope will obviously go in their favor and be a part of getting back on track as far as at least making it to the postseason and another bowl for the Gamecocks, which they were not able to do this past season. You wrote something interesting on Gamecock Central yesterday talking about turnarounds And this is a program that's no stranger to having one season being drastically different from the next in good ways and in bad ways. A couple of different seasons that you highlighted, one of them being, of course, Shane Beamer's first year back in 2021, where, as he talked about last week, nobody thought they were going to win more than maybe 2 games. They went out there and not only made a bowl game, but won that bowl game as well. So Coach Beamer, no stranger to vastly exceeding expectations placed on a team in a less than advantageous situation like he had in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, Gamecocks are looking to rebound from, of course, a 5-7 season. And so it just got me thinking, like, what is the precedent? There's obviously a lot of precedent around college football. I mean, you see teams all the time have a season where maybe it's expected, maybe it's not, and you're able to turn things around. And I think those turnarounds actually in the year 2024 are, I don't know if easier is the right word because nothing's easy, but you certainly have more tools at your disposal to orchestrate a quick turnaround. There's the other side of that too. For some programs, let's take Vandy, for instance. Now, they weren't very good last year. Mm-hmm. By the way, how about Pete's shade towards Syracuse? And I felt like that was like our shade at Vandy every day.
Well, every conference has to have one.
They have to have one or two of them. But, Vandy got ravaged in the portal this offseason, so it can go both ways. But in the transfer portal era, if you can both retain your players, recruit well in the high school ranks, and land some impactful transfers, you have a chance, if you can stay healthy and coach well and all those things, to turn things around pretty quickly. And so it just got me thinking, hey, what is the outlook for South Carolina this year? They went 5-7. Obviously, they got to turn things around. And it was a pretty recent example. 2020, COVID-shortened year. They win 2 games. And, I mean, Tyler, at that time, you weren't here yet. I got to tell you, man, it was the vibes were not good.
No, I was not here in South Carolina, but I remember the conversations around the program and, Muschamp himself, because there were several good seasons in his time here that gave you a lot of reason for optimism that, hey, maybe this is headed in the right direction. And even as rough as 2019 was, he still upset the number 3 team in the country in Georgia that year. So there was something to hang your hat on. But, yeah, 2020 went completely sideways in a year where we didn't think firing coaches was going to be a thing because of the money and all that kind of stuff, and not knowing, what the revenue was going to be for that year in a lot of instances that, it ended up happening regardless. And then it's funny because I was trying to go back the other day and find somebody making predictions on Beamer years down the road. Right? When he got hired in 2020, like, hey, here's what I think the program's going to be in 5-6 years. I wasn't able to find anything specifically for what I was looking for, but I did come across the picture of Beamer and Tanner in the indoor facility, I'm assuming on the day that Beamer got hired, and they're like standing at the little midfield logo. And I was like, that photo looks really weird. Why are they standing so far apart? Then I was like, oh yeah, that was COVID and the whole 6 feet thing. But it's really weird to look back in hindsight, but that was, kind of the shadow cast over that entire year, in addition to obviously now I'm looking for a head coach. Collins told me about the chaos that was that coaching search. And when after Muschamp was fired, like, you guys had a lot on your plate back then.
Yeah, and, Beamer's at the press conference. First of all, it's a virtual press conference. Everybody's wearing a mask.
Yep.
Beamer is up there, and if you look, he has gone a little bit more gray since then.
That was something else I noticed.
Coach,
I was like, he had a little more color in that hair back in 2020.
And also was down about, he told us, I think, he had lost some weight because he had COVID.
Yeah, he was a little pencil looking thing back then.
It was very interesting, but yeah, and you mentioned Muschamp in that 2019 season. Like, look, that was a pivotal point as well. Well, Muschamp had also, normally when you have a coaching change, things have gone bad.
Sure.
Unless a guy's retiring.
Sure.
And so when Will Muschamp came in, the 2016 season, Steve Spurrier had walked away in the middle of the year. The program ended up, the week after Spurrier stepped away, they beat Vandy. But after that, they lost every other game that season. Mm-hmm. They lost to the Citadel at home by a point. Ended up winning 3 games. Not much fun.
Sure.
So Muschamp comes in, again, fairly low expectations, a divisive, polarizing hire, but he ends up winning 6 games first year, getting South Carolina back to a bowl. The next year they go in 2017, they win 9 games, right? And so, there were certainly some expectations after that. 2018, they slipped to 7-6.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kind of started it.
Yep.
Because they had the bowl game against Virginia that was horrible. 2019 comes about. They beat Georgia. You go, okay, is this because they're putting together at that time a really good recruiting class,
and that was
2020 class.
That Georgia game, that was mid October.
Yeah,
so about halfway through the season,
putting together a good class. Like Jordan Birch was in it, Marshawn Lloyd, like those types of guys. You mentioned 2 guys who transferred, but still they did some good things while they were here.
Right,
sure,
right.
It was, and other very good players were in that class. And so it's not great vibes at the end of that year, but you go into 2020. You'd won 4 games, but you got this good recruiting class. Okay, can you turn things back in the right trajectory? As it turned out, they didn't.
Right.
And then the tenure ended at that point. So, it's a much different situation, I think, than this year. This year, look, you don't want to have another 5-win season. You don't want another 4-win season. You've got to right this ship. But I do think you can. We've talked about this all off season. It is all on paper at this point for every program in the country, including South Carolina. But you do see the potential being there for them to orchestrate that turnaround.
Right. We'll stay on this conversation because I do think it's interesting to look back in time at how other previous South Carolina head coaches fared in year number 4 and what that meant for them in the years after that, because some things do kind of stand out that don't give you a lot of optimism, but we'll dive into that coming up. It is the Garnet Trust Hour, sponsored by our friends over at Krantz Heating and Cooling. Tyler Head, Chris Clark, along with you on your Tuesday on The Game.
About Relief Factor.
Looking for a great, reliable, and local family-owned HVAC service? Got the perfect match for you. It's Krantz Cooling. KrantzCooling.com is where you can go to learn more about their services. That's Krantz with a K, Cooling with a K, KrantzCooling.com. You can call or click to schedule an appointment right from their website. They also have a cool little box there where you can just text them over a question. You can even pay your bill online. They make it super easy to work with you. Free second opinion on coil links and compressor with a coupon. They do air conditioning, they do heating, indoor air quality checks, and they have plenty of specials all the time. Whether you need maintenance, whether you got a problem you need checked out, whether you just want to get out in front and make sure that you're not going to have any problems with your unit, KrantzCooling.com, 803-672-3224 since 1983. Krantz Cooling and Heating is a locally owned and operated family business right here in the Midlands. KrantzCooling.com.
Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head, Chris Clark along with you. Sponsored by our friends over at Krantz Heating and Cooling. Talking about turnarounds with South Carolina football program as they look to improve on their 5-7 mark from last year, and at minimum, in a lot of people's eyes, including most of us here, to at least make it back to a bowl game this year to take a step back in the right direction. Year number 4 is a very interesting one when it comes to Gamecock head coaches in, the past 30 or so years. I'll use that as a mark after Coach Morrison, who, of course, did pass away. And had he lived, who knows what this program could have been, how much longer he would have been here. But since his last season back in 1988, you had Sparky Woods that came in. His 4th season, the program went 5-6, and he was gone after year number 5. Brad Scott comes in after that. His 4th year, they also go 5-6. He's also gone after year number 5. Lou Holtz, after that, he comes in 5-7 year number 4. He's gone after year number 6, so got a little bit longer there. Spurrier's going to be the one anomaly on this list. His 4th year, the program went 7-6. He obviously hung around for another 7 years and was able to bring a lot of success in those 3 straight 11-win seasons. But then you get to Will Muschamp, who again in year number 4 went 4-8 and was gone by the end of year number 5. So historically speaking, for a lot of coaches at South Carolina in this modern era, year number 4 is when things really start to turn sideways, unfortunately.
Yes, and I think one of our members, 5 for 5 Cock on the Insiders Forum, he pointed out something very similar. I posted the past turnaround story, and Tyler, maybe next hour in the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, maybe we can look back at a couple of those or one more of those seasons that we haven't mentioned yet, by the way. But he mentioned, hey, it is interesting to think about year 4 for all the coaches in this article. And the other coaches, of course, were Steve Spurrier, Lou Holtz, but those others that you mentioned, he noted that only Spurrier improved his record from year 3 to year 4. Now, year 4 for Spurrier, by the way, was not fantastic. They went 7-6, finished 3rd in the East, went to the Outback Bowl, lost to Iowa. It wasn't just this amazingly incredible year like he would eventually have beginning a couple seasons later.
Sure.
But it was an improvement of sorts. You did get back to a bowl, and you were able to kind of keep the trajectory. That 2009 recruiting class that they were working on at that time ended up being critical. It had guys like Stephon Gilmore, Devontae Holloman, DJ Swearinger,
right,
Alshon Jeffrey, and others, and that helped them keep the momentum.
And it's interesting to look, and Terry and I actually had somebody that commented or texted in yesterday for one of our Firehouse Subs Text of the Hours, and he said, the worst thing that ever happened to South Carolina was the success that Spurrier had because it proved that you could do that here, which, again, places a high bar when you hire a Muschamp, when you hire a Beamer, like, hey, we know you can do it. Can you get us back to where Spurrier was? Because when you look at that year, again, he went 7-5 year number 1, 8-5 year number 2, 6-6 in year number 3, which they missed a bowl game that year. That was 2007. A lot of good teams in the SEC that year, so didn't get picked for a bowl game, and there weren't as many bowl games back then. But you get to the end of year number 4. You've gone to bowl games in 3 of the 4 years. You had not had an under 500 season for, at that time, a program that hadn't accomplished a whole lot, had not had those huge, 11-win seasons just yet. So that bar of expectation was lower. And then, boom, a couple years later, you're starting to win 11 games every single year, high-profile bowl games, high BCS rankings, all that kind of stuff. And that kind of flipped the expectations in a lot of people's minds like, oh, hey, we can do this. Now, yes, you had a Hall of Fame national championship coach leading you, which did play into a lot of why that success happened and why he was able to get some of those high-level recruits. But since then, everybody points back to that and says, it can be done. Can you get us back there, Muschamp? Can you get us back there, Beamer? And unfortunately, in the decades since, every year has been a chase to try and get anywhere close to that mark.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Holtz was the coach where he took over, and things were not great. Yeah. Brad Scott had just gone 1-10. That's why he got fired. Holtz is one coach where Spurrier, Muschamp, and Beamer all kind of improve the situation from where it was in year one and year two.
Yep.
Very interesting that they all did that. Holtz came in and did not have that. They actually went a little bit backward. They kind of took a step forward, a step back to take 2 steps forward.
Sure.
They went 0-11 in 99, but then in year 2, they're 8-4. In year 3, they're 9-3. And that 2000 season was actually the year that I was going to mention as being so fascinating. You know, Carolina had gone 1-21 in the past 2 years. They beat New Mexico State, tear down the goalpost. Georgia comes to town.
Yep.
Heavily favored. Quincy Carter throws 5 picks. And Carolina wins that game. The fade happens that year. You know, they did lose to Clemson, but then you had the Outback Bowl win. So that was a fun year. And I mean, you go from 0-11 to 8-4. Like, that is a heck of a turnaround.
And, you know, I was 4 years old at that point in time, so I have no cognitive memory of that. But, I mean, that had to have felt like a national championship year almost, considering where
you
the program had been.
Yes, absolutely. But you know, it is just kind of interesting of the trends. Like, the coaches that South Carolina's brought in have been able to sometimes pretty drastically, like, Spurrier had a 1-win improvement. They went from 6-5 in Holtz's last year to 7-5 under Spurrier.
And Holtz is a little different here because he did retire.
He retired
at the end of 2004. It wasn't like, you know, hey.
But things weren't great.
So,
you know,
depending on who you talk to, maybe he was pushed out a little bit to a degree.
So Spurrier comes in, you know, 7-5 in year 1, 8-5 in year 2. And I remember at that time there was this expectation of taking, all right, here we go. We're going to take that leap now in year 3, year 4. It didn't happen. Stuck with it, and then you get the results that you see. But, you know, Will Muschamp orchestrated a turnaround from winning 3 games before he got in 2015, and then they won 6.
Right.
You know, Shane Beamer went from 2 wins during the COVID-shortened season before he got here, and then they go and win enough to make a bowl game in year 1. So it will be interesting to see. You know, every season stands on its own. Just because historically something has happened at one place doesn't mean it's always bound to be that way. Whatever happens this year for Shane Beamer, even if it completely matches something that's happened in the past, doesn't mean that, you know, it's going to follow the exact same trajectory. But it is a pivotal year because of what's happened. You know, you did exceed expectations in years 1 and 2. You did take a step back in 3. So now it's all about what you do with 4. And to me, you know, if you're looking at it glass half full, which I think Shane Beamer will, and it seems like the players are, that's an opportunity to drive things forward, point the trajectory back in the right direction. And if you've done that, then 2023 can really just be a bump in the road.
Sure.
And it can become a blip on the radar. It doesn't have to define your entire tenure. There are a lot of really great coaches. We don't know where Shane Beamer will be, you know, in that regard. But there are a lot of great coaches, guys who end up being great, who have had challenging seasons. So will it be that, or will that be the norm? And you got to hope that it's just a blip on the radar.
And I do wonder as well what the factor of, like, you know, I think Beamer feels like he's got the support of the university, Ray Tanner, behind him. Now, if they go out there and lose every single game this year, then we could have a different conversation. But I feel like we're all in agreement that outside of a catastrophic season, Beamer's going to be the coach no matter what in 2025. And I don't know if you coach better with more pressure on you, or maybe it depends on the person, but knowing that, okay, I got a little bit of leeway here. Last year wasn't great, but I'm not going in here with my seat being red hot in 2024 to get things back on track. You know what I mean? So I guess it depends on the coach. And Beamer, having never been a coach, we don't know how he coaches in that kind of scenario or not. But knowing you have a little bit of leeway, the trust behind you in the university and the athletic association that, hey, think you're going to get this back on track. Let's get things right in 2024, and let's focus ahead on after that.
When a coach goes into a season, which Shane Beamer's not, as you said, just to be clear.
Yeah.
You know, when a coach goes into a year kind of like Sam Pittman is.
Sure.
Or Billy Napier at Florida. Even though, I mean, that's not a lot of time, but at Florida, and nowadays, you know, especially.
Sure.
But especially now in 2024 at Florida, you don't get a lot of time. When you go in as almost like dead man walking, it normally doesn't end well.
Usually.
You know, I mean, can we think of scenarios where a coach saved his job? Like Gus Malzahn, like every year at Auburn, basically.
Oh, he's on the hot seat every single year.
Every year.
Till he inevitably upset a top 5 team.
Yeah. It's like, he just won 6 or 7 games. Everybody's ticked off. Here's an 11-win season.
And, yeah, he beat Alabama like once every 3 or 4 years, and that was enough to buy him a year or two.
But he's an anomaly. Like, he's the only one that could go in and be on the hot seat multiple years. Normally, if a guy's on the hot seat big time and they don't deliver, they're normally gone.
Right. We'll continue this conversation a little bit. A lot of you weighing in on some things that happened in the past and some turnarounds with South Carolina. We'll dive into that as well as maybe look at some all SEC snubs for South Carolina. Dive into that as well. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
Our friends at Midlands Home Renovations are committed to professionalism, integrity, and customer satisfaction with all of their projects. They customize in kitchen remodeling, bathroom remodeling, and roofing. And since their inception, their mission has remained the same. They want to provide you with quality service. They want to exceed all of your expectations. They are your trusted partner in home renovations right here in the Midlands. They've been exceeding customer expectations since 2008. Comprehensive, custom residential remodeling services right here in the Midlands. Partner with them for your next renovation project. You can get a free quote a couple different ways. 803-868-5651. If you have ideas about your next renovation project, hit them up on that line. Or go to MidlandsHomeRenovations.com. They actually have discounts for military, first responders, and healthcare, and are locally owned and operated. 803-868-5651 or MidlandsHomeRenovations.com.